Let me teach you about the adrenal medulla and its hormones. David7 Theater@gmail.com. Please contact, consult, okay? So that is it. David7 Science Theater. Today we're going to talk about the adrenal medulla. But before that, don't forget to like our videos, subscribe for more and better videos. Our channel has it all. And share to other students to also enjoy. Subscribe for more and better videos. Alright. The adrenal medulla. Histologically, this is made up of cells which we call chromaffin cells, and they are innervated by preganglionic sympathetic neurons, preganglionic neurons of the sympathetic nervous system. And these chromaffin cells forming adrenal medulla show yellow granules in cytoplasm. That's why we call them chromaffin cells, because they show a positive chromaffin reaction, and hence we call them chromaffin cells. Functionally, these cells are considered to be modified postganglionic neurons which do not have axons. Okay, so we consider them to be postganglionic neurons which are having no axons functionally, because that's how they perform. They're activated by the nervous system. And catecholamines are stored in the chromaffin granules. In addition to the catecholamines, the chromaffin granules also contain some proteins, lipids, and adenine nucleotides, mainly adenosine triphosphate. Okay, and the nerve endings, if I want to talk about them, they are present in the adrenal medulla and are the cholinergic preganglionic sympathetic fibers that synapse directly on chromaffin cells. So these preganglionic sympathetic fibers, they release acetylcholine onto the chromaffin cells, and that is how they activate them to cause secretion of the catecholamines contained in the chromaffin granules. Okay, and these fibers traverse the splanchnic nerve and are myelinated, emanating mainly from the lower thoracic segments, that is T5 and to T9, and of the ipsilateral intermediolateral gray column of the spinal cord. In one video, I was talking about the spinal cord. The spinal cord between just the dorsal gray horn and the ventral gray horn, we have the intermediolateral gray horn, and that horn forms a column, which column on the ipsilateral side for the segments between T5 and T9 will give off nerve fibers, the preganglionic sympathetics, which come to the adrenal medulla through the splanchnic nerves. So they reach the gland, the adrenal gland, call it suprarenal gland. And the schematic diagram of the adrenal medulla is here. Look at this. I have preganglionic fibers, T5 to around T9, okay, in splanchnic nerve. Now they reach the adrenal medulla. Adrenal medulla is just the central portion of the gland, and the cortex forms the outer portion. It secretes very many hormones. By these nerves are preganglionic sympathetics, which release acetylcholine, and the cells of chromaffin cells are like a ganglion. So adrenaline containing cells are in here, as you can see. Alright, let's continue. So schematic diagram to show the arterial blood supply and venous drainage of the adrenal gland. If you just look at this, I might use some of these terms here, but the blood supply or blood drainage of the adrenal gland is as follows. Number one, there is a portal system here. And this portal system, number one, is formed by the superior suprarenal artery. Okay, recall we have the superior, middle, and inferior suprarenal arteries. So number one is the superior suprarenal artery. It brings oxygenated blood to the adrenal to the gland, and we have a portal in the cortex, which has a capillary in the cortex and another capillary in the medulla. So this blood still continues to the medulla. It transports some chemicals produced by the cortex. So you look at number one. Number one shows the blood, the artery. That is the superior suprarenal artery. And this artery brings blood to the first capillary in the cortex. Then the blood flows to the next capillary in the medulla, and finally goes out through the suprarenal vein. And I also have arteries like we have the middle suprarenal artery and the inferior suprarenal artery. Number 5 is the sinusoidal capillaries in the cortex, and number 6 is the medullary veins supplying medulla and forms a portovascular system. Alright, let's continue. That is a schematic diagram to show arterial blood supply and venous drainage of the adrenal gland. And the hormones of adrenal medulla are here. Secretes catecholamines, which usually include epinephrine, norepinephrine, and dopamine. And about 80% of adrenomedullary catecholamine is epinephrine, and the 20% or the rest is norepinephrine. Apart from catecholamines, the adrenal medulla also contains small amounts of dynorphins, neurotensin, encephalin, somatostatin, and substance P. Alright, so these are also secreted by the adrenal medulla. And if you look at this, the secretion has factors that stimulate it. Okay, so if you read here, the adrenal medulla releases primarily the epinephrine into the bloodstream, where it acts on distant targets, whereas the sympathetic ganglia release norepinephrine into the synaptic cleft, which acts on the target cell at the point of release. So in this diagram, I'm just showing you the stimuli associated with secretion of catecholamines from adrenal medulla and sympathetic nervous system. Okay, so the sympathetic nervous system secretes the catecholamines, and also the adrenal medulla secretes catecholamines. But adrenal medulla majorly secretes epinephrine, whereas sympathetic system secretes norepinephrine in the terminals of the postganglionic nerve fibers, and the norepinephrine acts at the point of release, whereas epinephrine will be transported in blood to reach distant target sites. Okay, so the same acetylcholine is released by the preganglionic fibers or neurons. All right. So what are the factors that cause the release of these hormones? These catecholamines are released when there is pain, when there is anxiety, when there is trauma, when there is hypovolemia, when there is hypoglycemia, when there is hypothermia. All these are forms of stress are detected by the hypothalamus and brainstem. Okay, so the hypothalamus will eventually cause this descending of signals to the spinal cord, and these signals will eventually evoke uh, uh, it's not local, but it is widespread. Okay, widespread sympathetic discharge. All right, the sympathetic system will be activated during stress. So what are the actions of a catecholamine? 1. Has metabolic actions. Catecholamines have very many roles within the body, and I will just speak about like 3/4, but there are very many roles. So let me start with the metabolic actions of catecholamines. Epinephrine affects metabolic functions more than norepinephrine via the alpha and beta receptors on the cells. And the general metabolic effects of epinephrine will include increasing oxygen consumption by about 20 to 40% and increasing carbon dioxide output. The raised basal metabolic rate and respiratory quotient increase occurs, and also increased heat production due to stimulation of cell oxidative processes. So epinephrine will increase the BMR, will increase oxygen consumption, will increase carbon dioxide. Metabolic effects of epinephrine will include raising the BMR and respiratory quotient, increasing heat production due to stimulation of the cellular oxidative processes. So what are the effects of catecholamines or adrenomedullary hormones on carbohydrate metabolism? Epinephrine produces hyperglycemia and makes the glucose available for the brain and other tissues to meet the emergence by its following effects. 1. Glycogenolysis is stimulated in the liver. 2. Glycogenesis is reduced in the liver by inhibition of enzyme glycogen synthase. 3. Gluconeogenesis, that is hepatic production of glucose from lactate, amino acids and glycol will be increased. Alright. And 4. Insulin secretion will be inhibited. Alright. And glucagon secretion is stimulated. This amplifies the hyperglycemic effects of epinephrine. Alright. And lastly, the secretion of STH is stimulated, which then stimulates cortisol secretion. And you know cortisol is a potent gluconeogenic hormone. Alright, so we start with norepinephrine right now. Norepinephrine increases heart rate and force of contraction via the beta-1 receptors, resulting in an increased cardiac output and rise in systolic blood pressure. Okay, but this causes vasoconstriction via alpha-1 receptors, resulting in an increased peripheral resistance and increasing the diastolic blood pressure. So you can see norepinephrine, a single hormone. Via beta-1 it is rising SBP, via alpha-1 it is rising the DBP. How does that affect? Look at this. As a result of increasing both SBP and DBP, mean blood pressure is markedly increased, which reflexively by stimulation of the baroreceptors in the aortic and carotid sinuses, decrease heart rate, force of contraction, and cardiac output. Therefore, the net result of norepinephrine is decreasing heart rate, decreasing cardiac output, increasing peripheral resistance, and increased mean blood pressure. Because of this reason, epinephrine and not epinephrine, we use it in patients with shock. I hope you got my point. And because the hormone is raising SBP and DBP, MAP will rise, okay? And if mean blood pressure rises, the sinus and aortic baroreceptors will detect this increase, and the overall effect will be reflexive decreasing of heart rate, force of contraction, and cardiac output. All right. Effects of catecholamines on other systems. On the central nervous system, catecholamines via the beta receptors activate the reticular activating system by lowering its threshold, and thus this leads to arousal and alerting responses produced during anxiety or producing anxiety, apprehension, and coerced tremors of extremities. So that is what happens on central nervous system if it is stimulated by the catecholamines from adrenal medulla. On the GIT, epinephrine via beta receptors causes relaxation of smooth muscles of the wall of the gut, decreasing its tone and motility. And via the alpha receptors, the same hormone causes contraction of sphincters of the gut, so that the net result of the hormone is constipation. Alright, so in stress, defecation or motility of the GIT is not important. That's why when produced on stress, epinephrine will cause constriction of the sphincters of the gut. Alright, on urinary bladder, epinephrine produces retention of urine by relaxing the detrusor muscle. So urination is not necessary when this hormone is produced. That's why the detrusor muscle will be relaxed. Okay, on the skin, catecholamines act via alpha receptors on the pilomotor muscle, producing piloerection of the hair, by acting on the sweat glands of the palm and sole produce localized sweating called adrenergic sweating. Now here comes another term. We have adrenergic sweating as opposed to how sweating has been occurring all along. Okay, we know is active via alpha receptors on pilomotor muscle, producing pure of hair by acting on sweat, producing pure of the hair. So if they just act on the sweat glands of the palm and sole, they will produce local sweating, which we call adrenergic sweating. Let's talk about on skeletal muscle. When you're in exercise, epinephrine via beta-2 receptors increases blood supply by causing vasodilation. It also increases glycogenolysis in muscle and releases glucose into the circulation. Of course, the muscles, we don't release glucose, but what will occur that when we have increased glycogenolysis in the muscle, much lactate will be produced, and this goes to the liver where more glucose is synthesized. All right. And on the eyes, epinephrine causes mydriasis by contracting the lateral pupillae muscle, and via beta receptors causes relaxation of the ciliary muscle, producing flattening of the lens. These effects provide better far vision benefit to the endangered individual. So because you're in danger now, it will cause the pupil will become larger. Okay, the size of the pupil will become larger, and what will occur? It will increase, or it will allow better far vision. All right, let's continue. On respiration, epinephrine via the beta-2 receptors, it will relax the smooth muscles of the bronchioles, producing bronchodilation. It also increases the rate of contraction, and it also increases the rate and force of respiration. All right, it will increase the rate of respiration, and in blood, epinephrine will reduce blood coagulation time by increasing the activity of factor 5. Okay, so what are the effects on secretion of other hormones? I told you epinephrine has a lot of functions. Cholamines have a lot of functions. If you look at this, insulin and somatostatin secretion is decreased via the alpha-2 receptors because these hormones will decrease cyclic AMP. This gland of pancreas has alpha, it has G alpha I, okay? It has GI. It has the inhibitory G protein receptor, okay? So it will cause decrease in cyclic AMP, and eventually it will cause reduced secretion of insulin and the hormone inhibitor somatostatin. Then we have glucagon and pancreatic peptide secretion, which are increased via beta-2 receptors. So alpha-2 receptors have GI, okay? The beta-2, they have GS. So these are stimulatory receptors, so when activated, secretion will increase. Thyroid releasing hormone, induced secretion of TSH from thyrotropes is decreased via the alpha-2 receptors. So secretion of TSH, which is controlled by the hypothalamus, okay, will be decreased because these hormones are acting via alpha-2 receptors. And if you look at this last point here, the thyroid hormone secretion is enhanced by catecholamines under certain circumstances, and behavioral conversion of T4 to T3 is stimulated via beta-2 receptors. Let's look now at the role of the sympathoadrenal system in the various physiological states. For example, during exercise, from mild to moderate exercise manually, the sympathetic nervous system is activated. Okay? And however, during severe exercise, the adrenal medullary system is also increased. So you've seen we have two axes. We have that of the sympathetic nervous system, and we had that of the adrenal medulla. So when there's exercise, mild to moderate, we manually activate the sympathetic nervous system. But if it is severe, Also, the medulla is excited or to be to the secretions of these two hormones. What is the role during exposure to cold? The sympathoadrenomedullary system is essential for maintenance of body temperature during exposure to cold. This epinephrine maintains body temperature by conserving body heat as well as exposure to cold has been done. Alright, let's continue. There's a role during hypoglycemia. When the blood glucose is lower than normal, this is a very potent stimulant of epinephrine secretion from adrenal medulla. While it does not increase sympathetic neuroactivity to any significant degree. So this one is activating the axis of the adrenal medulla, but not the axis of the sympathetic nervous system to produce norepinephrine. So the epinephrine restores plasma glucose levels and glucose delivery to the central nervous system. In hypoglycemia, one of the mechanisms they employ will be the one which can restore plasma glucose levels and glucose delivery to the central nervous system, call it the brain, to stay alive, to stay normal, to stay in normal function, no coma, which they usually call hypoglycemic coma. So epinephrine on release plays that role of restoring the glucose. Okay. And lastly, let me talk about the electrolytes in the body. But before that, look at this. We have, I talked about that a long time ago, sorry. Cardiovascular effects of catecholamines. On the heart, it is a little bit different, but we shall catch up. Look at this. On the heart rate is increased by epinephrine, but decreased by norepinephrine. Cardiac output is increased by epinephrine, but decreased by norepinephrine. This is because I said that there is reflexive decreasing of heart rate and cardiac output when norepinephrine reaches the heart, okay? Because it will at first raise the blood pressure of both systole and diastole, but the eventual effect will be lowering the contractions and cardiac output due to increased mean arterial pressure. So the norepinephrine, it means it will increase the mean arterial pressure, it increases diastolic, systolic, and peripheral resistance, but decreases heart rate and cardiac output. Whereas epinephrine will increase heart rate, cardiac output, decrease peripheral resistance, increase systolic blood pressure, and decrease diastolic pressure. But the mean arterial pressure will be normal or it will be decreased. Okay, so let's continue. And lastly, I just urge you to like our videos, subscribe for more and better videos, share to other students to also enjoy, share to other people to also enjoy the science we get. You see, now we've discussed about the adrenal medulla. It has a lot of hormones. These hormones have a lot of functions. We've talked about the effects on the systems. We've talked about the effects on the cardiovascular system, call it the heart and the blood vessels. We've seen how catecholamines are important in the central nervous system. We've seen where they are produced, how they come about. We've seen the two axes. So thank you for following us. Subscribe for more and better videos.